Hello, everybody. I'm James Yerkes, a former global head in HSBC Wealth Management and Private Bank, and I'm joined today by Alex Hoffman, CEO and co-founder of an AI investment analysis co-pilot called Marvin Labs. Also, Mark Bolton, who is an AI strategy and wealth management expert. Welcome to our LinkedIn Live event. Over the next hour, the three of us will dive into how AI transforms key functions like data analytics, risk management, and client services, while exploring the overlaps between humans and AI, ethical concerns, and the strategic approaches CIOs can take in leveraging AI for their organizations. Our goal is to provide practical insights for analysts and businesses looking to navigate AI implementation and overcome challenges. We have several questions sent to us in advance and invite you to pose your own questions throughout the discussion in the comments sections. Please don't be shy. All questions will make for a more engaging discussion and you're welcome to ask them. So let's take a look, first of all, at some of the questions we're going to cover today, and we're going to cover them in order. So we'll look on screen now at the 5 main questions that we're going to discuss between myself, Mark, and Alex. And as I say, feel free to add additional questions or comments as we talk through each one. So number 1, where will AI most impact the investment management industry in the medium term? Then we'll move on to how humans in the industry most effectively work with AI and what ethical considerations does this raise? I think that's an important topic. Thirdly, a question, actually a pre-question, well, several pre-questions around this, which was how should CIOs consider using AI in the industry and what trends and approaches will likely have the most impact? Fourth, what are the most valuable AI use cases emerging in the industry? And I think from Alex's point of view, the opportunity to share what Marvin Labs is doing there, I think is a great case study for that. And fifth, what advice would we give firms hesitant or concerned about adopting AI? So those are our 5 questions that we're going to cover today. We will swing now, first question, which will pop up on screen, and I will come to Alex. So where will AI most impact the investment management industry in the medium term? And Alex, I know you've been inspired in this space to create Marvin Labs to solve problems that you think will have the most impact in investment management. So can you tell us a little bit about Marvin Labs, but also in answer to this question, where and why you think the investment in management industry will be impacted in the medium term?
Sure. Thank you, James. Thanks for asking the question, for hosting us. So just to give you a bit of perspective, so my background is I used to be an investment analyst at an investment fund. And one of my roles was keeping track of a couple dozens of investment targets that we were looking at from time to time. And if you think about AI in the investment management industry, kind of the natural impulse in the industry is always to look at AI for ancillary functions. So that's AI for helping client organizations interact with the demands that the clients put on them. That's either in reporting, so it's in more customized reporting, it's in more customized portfolio construction, it's in more customized implementation of constraints, and it's a bunch of automation challenges that the industry faces, and that modern generative AI makes possible for the first time. So I think this is a very important thing for the industry to look at. It's a natural impulse. It's also the natural impulse in a lot of other industries. But where investment management has a unique opportunity is integrating AI into the core of the product, into generating alpha. And that's exactly what we're doing at Marvin Labs. So we are helping investment analysts, such as was myself, in making sense of a lot of the unstructured information that was previously very, very hard to systematize and to analyze at scale. We are making that feasible for the first time, and that's one of the big contributions that Gen AI has to the industry is that it makes that possible. And I think that's the very exciting time we'll live through. And we hope that that executives in the industry kind of take this topic of using AI to generate more investment return, better investment return, or to optimize risk serious. And this is really where we sit.
I think it's always, Alex, just on those points, I think for myself, having been a global head in HSBC Wealth Management and Private Bank, one of the challenges was always to balance, continual cost pressures in terms of how to improve capacity and reduce cost budgets, with at the same time trying to improve quality. So you always have that kind of challenge of you've got more squeeze on the cost base at the same time as pressure to improve quality of output. Is that an area you think AI will help solve? Because people are always trying to reduce the cost and improve the quality, and AI is one of the tools that can really make a difference in investment management.
Yeah, so we published an article a week or two ago where we try to quantify the impact AI has on the industry, and we arrived at the figure where we think a typical investment analyst can cut out about 40% of their time with the help of AI. And that's kind of predominantly in helping them sift through unstructured information, and it's in helping them automate a few things, including updating models, creating new models, helping with generating new investment hypotheses and things like that. So, and then it's more a management question, and it's a question for senior executives in the industry to then figure out what to do with this 40% efficiency, right? Is it's either a complete cost saving, so you're doing the same work with fewer people? Is this an increase in quality, so your analyst now all of a sudden is freed up to spend a lot more time on more differentiating activities, more engaging activities, or is it something where all of a sudden the typical analyst in an investment management role doesn't cover 30, 40 companies anymore, but they cover 50, 60 companies all of a sudden? So I think, and you just increase the universe of companies you cover, right? So I think that's a question that is left for senior management. We don't have a particular view. What we tell our clients is basically we can squeeze out this efficiency by eliminating a lot of the low-hanging fruit and a lot of the not terribly value-adding functions. We can squeeze that out, and then it's left to you what you actually do with the additional gains that you get from that.
No, I can understand. I mean, Mark, you've been at Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, Capgemini, HSBC. I mean, we work together at HSBC in the wealth management and global markets teams. What's your thinking and perspectives on where AI is going to have the most impact in investment management? And to Alex's point, the 40% that it could potentially take out in terms of cost base and speed.
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting conversation, because that 40% number is plus minus whatever it is. That's exactly the senior management challenge, which is what do we do with the additional capacity that we free up? So as Alex said, is it increasing the depth and quality of what we're covering, or is it increasing the breadth of what we're covering, or are we just going to squeeze 40% of cost out? I think just going back to earlier parts of the conversation, I think a lot of what I'm hearing and seeing in the industry is it's the ability to, more than anything, handle very unstructured data and data points around organizations and around businesses that are being analyzed. That is one of the biggest gains from AI, in that it can do that quickly, it can do that effectively. So it's everything from social media chatter, Discord, ad hoc interviews with C-suite members. That kind of unstructured data that in the past was difficult to grab, difficult to get a handle on and understand what was being said there and the impact potentially for that investment, is now much quicker and easier. And that forms, I think, a significant part of the 40%. But as Alex said, there's many other areas, just routine analytics being automated and reporting, portfolio creation, model creation, scenarios and new theories as well are all areas where we get the 40%. How senior management will use it, I think is going to vary company by company. I really do. I think some will take the opportunity to grow their businesses by covering more. Others will want to go deeper, and others will just say, great, we've got some cost savings we can make. And I think it's going to vary by firm.
No. So when we started Marvin Labs, so my co-founder Jürgen and me, we started Marvin Labs about a year ago, and our initial mission was to, it's depth of quality, right? Because we both come from an academia. Jürgen comes from academia. I come from an investment management, very cutthroat, very competitive background, and we were always kind of looking at this with a view of how do we give the analysts tools to just outcompete their competition. That was always our approach, because that's how we were kind of brought up. And now, over the last year and discussions that we had with our clients, with the industry, we're opening ourselves up to this approach of, all right, I don't need to necessarily do that with my efficiency gains, right? I can also put some of the efficiency gains into cost savings. But our approach has always been kind of to look at the quality side of it. That's also kind of what motivates us that motivates our product. We don't just want to kind of provide replacement level quality. We want to provide kind of very good, high competitive quality in our outputs. And I think that's kind of showing in everything we do. But we see that the industry is using it to cut costs.
Yeah, I think when you look at, one question for me is, and the thought for me about the impact is, when I look at the recent earnings rounds and season, when you look at companies, Meta, Boeing, Walt Disney, all of those, the ability now for AI to assess an earnings document within minutes must be, have a significant positive impact for the future. Coming out, say, midnight, or a different time. I think that's something, isn't it? In terms of Marvin Labs, that takes like minutes to analyze, a significantly large piece of, qualitative, sort of company information, and yet within minutes, it's been assessed, key highlights pulled out, differences between previous documents. Is that something, both of you see as, around those earnings spikes where there's all those announcements, where AI can really shortcut what must have previously taken quite some work?
Yeah. I think really that's a very, very good use case, right? I mean, earnings season is always a busy season for every analyst, for every investor. It's not too uncommon that multiple companies that you cover report at the same time, and just staying up to date with everything is difficult, because as an analyst, obviously you're not just looking at the high level stuff, right? You're not just looking at revenue and some margin figures, but you're really tasked with going into the details. That's really where you get a part of your competitive edge. And I think as everyone that has ever worked in investment management, in particular, that covers kind of some US companies from the European side, it's not a lot of fun reading a 50-page legal document that is, for the most parts, incredibly dull. Reading that at 2 a.m. at night after a fifth cup of coffee, and looking for the small change in this document, and it's also not a terribly value-adding task for the analyst to do either, right? Because in 99% of cases, you won't find anything in there. But you still need to do it. You should do it, because in the 1% of cases, that really makes a difference. And what we're really doing with Marvin Labs is we are finding the needle in the haystack, right? We're finding the 1% cases a lot easier than it was before, and that's really where we're helping the industry.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, certainly my drink of choice at 2 a.m. was never coffee, but I understand the point, Alex. I think just to move on to the human angle, which was the second question that we wanted to explore, because I think that's particularly, this debate often about AI is described as a co-pilot, which I think sums it up very nicely. But how can humans in the industry most effectively work with AI, and what ethical considerations does this raise? I mean, Mark, I know you've written about this. You've written several books on the topic, and also books around different age groups interacting with AI. So could you just give us your thoughts on this, and certainly where some of the biggest challenges are, or the crunch points between humans and AI in the world of ethics?
Yeah, so I think the co-pilot term is a good one, apart from it's being co-opted by Microsoft, so it has a little bit of IP ownership by Microsoft in that respect. But actually, it's a good analogy, because what we're seeing across all industries, but especially in investment management, is that AI is becoming exactly that co-pilot. It's helping fly the plane. It's taking over routine tasks. It's enabling the analyst to focus more on depth and quality of output, quality of analysis. And we're seeing that with multiple tools. I think one of the challenges is, and I'll talk a little bit about raw LLMs, like just using Chat or Gemini, which a lot of firms are not allowing, and I'll talk about that in a second. I think one of the challenges in using these new AI tools is that there's some skills upgrading that needs to be done for a lot of people that are not familiar with the prompt and response type approach to using off-the-shelf LLMs like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and so on. Now, I said earlier, a few moments ago, in a lot of organizations, those are prohibited, and what they're doing is they're creating layers between the LLM at the back and what the user can access at the front, and building tools and platforms and so on. They're doing that for a number of reasons. One is to deal with the fact that, frankly, we are not all prompt engineers. We haven't all done prompt engineered certifications. We don't know necessarily how to nest the prompts within a conversation with an LLM. So people are building tools. Marvin Labs is an example of one. People are building tools to disintermediate that. They're also building tools that allow behind the scenes that activity to take place, but at the front, at the interface, it's more of a normal kind of analysis and working approach to looking at a company, looking at what commentary was there, and seeing a response to that without having to do any prompt engineering whatsoever. So that's one of the ways in which companies are reducing the need for users to be prompt engineers and experts in raw LLMs. I think, just quickly talking about the ethical side of things, that disintermediation with these technologies between raw LLMs and users has also helped and is helping to reduce some of the ethical issues, particularly around data privacy, particularly I was going to say intellectual property, but PPI, personally identifiable information, which clearly you do not want to get into the public domain. If you're using that in your work, you don't want that to get into the public domain. That is protected under multiple laws in multiple jurisdictions. So tools are coming into place to protect that and reduce some of the ethical issues. But in the early days, I'm talking about 18 months ago, when LLMs were first being used, we saw a lot of leakage, data leakage, and that's why most large organizations put firewall prohibition on using raw LLMs on their networks, because people do it across their phones, and that's another issue. So those are that's a couple of the ethical considerations around IP, personally identifiable information. There's also transparency is a consideration as well. If not so much in investment management, there's certain aspects of financial services where you're making decisions around access to credit, access to certain products and services, or for retail customers or high net worth customers. You've got to be aware of potential bias in the models and how that can affect the decision, and also the risk around not having the transparency of how that decision is being made to extend or not extend credit. So those are some of the challenges. A lot of companies working on them. Marvin's a great example of that.
I think that's a very good point around the bias, and we always talk about it a lot in terms of humans having unconscious bias, etc. Alex, just coming to you on that topic around this crossroads between humans and AI. What's your thoughts on it, and I know the way you've designed Marvin Labs is that it's painless in terms of the prompts. You don't have to, go prompting as an engineer to try and get the best out of some of the documents and announcements, because you've done it for people. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this whole new user experience that people are now interacting with for the first time, this a chat-based interface, is still very very poorly understood by a lot of users, right? I think that's pretty clear. I think if you look back through the history of the industry of investment management, we've always been an industry that has been fairly aggressively embracing technology, and that has forced technology throughout the practitioners, right? I mean, in the 80s, we were one of the first industries to embrace spreadsheets. We were one of the first industries to really embrace the internet. We embraced massive quantitative databases that are out there. There's today no skill in figuring out how much revenue Microsoft made last year, because that's a readily available number by literally dozens of different vendors. But in the 80s or in the 90s even, that was still a differentiable skill. So I think there is the industry has always been an early adopter of technology, and it's always helped the industry push the envelope. And I think in 2010s, 2020s, right, everybody was becoming or was already an Excel expert, and now we're, for the first time, moving slightly away from this user interface Excel, which is what everybody experiences finance with, to a bit of a slightly more loose interface, which is a chat. So what we see with a lot of our users is that it is just incredibly difficult to do any amount of quality research in a chat interface, because for a chat interface you really need to know what you're looking for, and a lot of in particular exploratory work in investment management is around seeing data and glancing through vast amounts of data and picking up on what's interesting. So it's more about getting an overview rather than finding the answers to particular questions, at least in most stages. And that's something that is very difficult still to do for humans.
Yeah, I mean, just on that point of finding answers to specific questions, we just had a question in actually from Goksin Korkmaz. Sorry if I've not got that right, but I've hopefully pronounced it. If I could, I'll just read it. Actually, I think it'll be easier. As AI continues to transform wealth management, do you think there's room for an AI-powered solution that enables firms to build mobile apps tailored to automate key processes like client onboarding, KYC, portfolio management, and client communication? Much more specific points. And how do you see this impacting operational efficiency in wealth management? So that's sort of some very specific areas there, as opposed to the pure equity analysis.
I'll take a run at that, James. I think the answer is maybe. And the reason I say maybe is we all remember, those of us who've kicked around the banking business for a few years will remember back in the 90s and the early noughties, the proliferation of what was then what they used to call end user computing. So people building their own spreadsheet models, they got more and more complex. They started using data integration and APIs to corporate databases, external databases. And these things became not only big, but they became critical to the business. And suddenly you realize that when one fell over, when a line of VB wasn't working correctly, it had a major business impact. So there was so those kind of citizen-led what was EUC, now citizen-led developments, I think, have been reined in a bit. There is definitely a place and a space that needs to be created, a sandbox, if you will, where citizen-led developments like the type that you're talking about there, Goksenin, I think, are enabled and facilitated, but we need controls within particularly large organizations so that they don't become business dependent without the necessary support and support that goes around important applications. So that'll be my response.
Yeah, I think everybody that has spent some time working in banking, and I spent a few years at Credit Suisse, and I know, Mark, you as well. And this is in no meant a comment about particular processes at Credit Suisse. But I think what everybody that has worked in banking has seen as the Frankenstein spreadsheet that is doing business critical information, that is doing business critical processes, that has taken a life of its own, and nobody really seems to understand what the spreadsheet is doing. But it's still critical. I think, I mean, from a human side, right, having been a little cog in the wheel of a major operation, it's very easy to fall for the benefits of these end user led developments, because it's, in most organizations, it's just so difficult to get buy-in to build highly specialized, highly targeted applications. I think bringing this back to the AI side, I think what we're seeing is a little bit more centralization when it comes to AI, because it's such an enterprise level endeavor in most parts. I think the one exception to this centralization drive really is the investment side, because the investment side is one of the few parts of the business that is really not that terribly integrated on a process by process level. Really, and you see this today, what one analyst does that covers technology stock and what another analyst does that covers automotive stocks is woefully different, right? It's access to different specialized databases. It's access to different networks. There's a bit of shared infrastructure. Obviously, there's quantitative databases, there's spreadsheets, but really it's fundamentally a different job. And what we are seeing is that for us, right, when we really talk to the investment managers that look at particular industries, they can make still decisions rather in isolation. It's from a company side, so from Marvin Labs as a company, it's a very interesting thing, because you don't have to go through long sales processes really to sell to a desk or to sell to an individual analyst. But the other items mentioned in this list, right? KYC, client onboarding, client communication. That's a wholly different kind of worms. And I think Mark's point here, he really is a really valid one. That this is centralized stuff. This is not just process dependent stuff, but this is legally influenced stuff. In particular, if you think about KYC, this is something that any regulator will look at if you build an AI-enabled KYC application, and I think you better get that right.
Well, I think that brings up, I mean, it's come up a few times. I've seen like litigation in this space is, concerning, especially if you start talking about topics like KYC and regulation, etc. Just another quick question that's come in before we move off this topic about AI and humans, and maybe just a very quick sort of one-liner from yourselves about, do you have any worries about AI and humans? I mean, asking you to do that in a quick one-liner, I know is a little bit disingenuous, but any concerns, or are you kind of see it as a sort of hand in hand through the flowers dancing in the meadow, or actually do you see this as a bit more concerning? Mark, over to you first.
Yeah, I think in other industries, James, and I will be really brief because I think this is a little away from the investment management space, but I'm heavily involved in the entertainment industry and have been for many years. And as many people may be aware, the Screen Actors Guild went on strike last year, specifically around AI issues, the same with the writers. And for them, it's all about intellectual property, likeness protection, and so on. So not sure that that particular issue applies much in investment management, but in other industries, it's a game changer. It's a massive game changer. And the screen actors are still on strike in the video gaming industry. there are 80 companies that will not sign the contract that protects actors' likenesses, voice, images, and green screen work, and won't sign the contract. So, this is a real big issue, legal issue in other industries.
Alex, what's your thoughts? Because you're right at the front here with Marvin Labs.
Yeah. I think there really are two answers to that, right? One answer is really going into Mark's direction, right? It is a foundationally changing technology, right? This is the next version of the internet. This is the next version of the computer. This is the next version of the automobile. It's a disruptive innovation that we're living through, and that has positives and that has negatives, just as any disruptive innovation. But that's mostly an answer to the question, right? Are we worried about AI as a disruptive innovation, just as any other disruptive innovation? But I think some people have worries about AI being more than just a disruptive innovation, right? AI taking over some human functions and turning against humanity, and on that, I'm a lot more an optimist that it's a great tool, but it's not gonna. Sorry, I think the computer.
I thought your AI tool had turned on you there, and you were back against switched off.
This is a really prescient thing. No, so I think we're at the very, very least very, very, very very far away from having AI have any impact on humanity as
I think for me in the investment analysis space, I see that this phrase, the AI co-pilot, I think is a really good way to see things, because I still see a human judgment, human experience assessing information is still always going to be valuable. But the pieces we talked about earlier about being able to do things 40% faster, being able to look at things like earnings statements minutes after they're produced, these are all things that are enhanced by AI, and it's not so much a matter of AI v human. I do think that phrase co-pilot captures things nicely. Just to move into a slightly different topic, because we've got several CIOs actually on the call, on the video. How should CIOs consider using AI in the industry, and what trends and approaches will likely have the most impact? And I think that's a topic you've looked at yourself, Alex, with CIOs, because you spent a lot of time looking at how Marvin Labs can differentiate itself in the industry. So could you take that one first as a question? I think it's a good one about CIOs using AI and the differentiation that companies like Marvin Labs have brought to the market.
Yeah. So if you look at kind of a lot of the advice being given to senior executives, CIOs, those kind of decision makers, if you look at that over the last year or so, a lot of it boils down to use AI to do automation in areas where you couldn't do automation, where you really kind of have to be cutting edge to do automation. And that's client reporting. It's about converting complex client requirements into portfolios. It's about compliance monitoring. It's about kind of all these dream scenarios where you really are having mostly a cost-based approach, where you were dreaming 5 years ago that you had a magic wand automation tool that allowed you to do cost cutting in some areas that you really didn't like. You really only did because you had to, and you wanted to take out some costs. And I think a lot of consultants run around telling you that, right? AI is this magic wand that allows you to do automation in those unloved areas. And I think that doesn't go far enough, right? I think one of the key things that AI enables is AI enables you to look at the revenue generating side of your business.
Yeah.
And that really is investment decisions, and that's portfolio implementation, portfolio management, risk management, those kind of things. And AI is terribly helpful there as well. And And I think any CIO that doesn't look at that is scared of their investment organization because they're typically not the targets of these initiatives, is doing their firm a disservice. I'm sorry about my light. Let me fix my light.
That's right. I thought there was either some police outside your house or this. You need to fix the light. I think that's why you do that, Alex. Actually, one of the things I've observed, I work with a lot of business owners in medium-sized companies, sometimes very large companies, but predominantly medium-sized companies. And the question for CIOs I find is that it's how to create the alignment between the organizational strategy and the adoption of AI. So it's not almost like utilizing AI is not like just plugging in a platform. The question for the CIO is how does it integrate and overlap with the operational strategy that the overall business is trying to incorporate. And that goes much deeper into things like proprietary development of systems versus use of open source, access to AI tools within the organization or not. And I think that's the topic I've seen CIOs grappling with, is alignment of AI with the broader organizational strategy. I don't know what you think about that yourself, Alex, and Mark. I'll come to you after that, because I know you've worked in some very large companies who've encountered that challenge, and CIOs have found that very difficult.
Yeah, and it is a difficult thing to do. And I think a lot of what, in particular, third-party consultants come out with advice on is just treat this as any other regular automation project that you're running. Treat this very much, treat AI, boil down AI to things you understand, which is automation, which is cost efficiencies, which is process quality. Do that. Because that's something you understand, that avoids you having to deal with the question of how do I, change other parts of my organization? How do I look at, some of the parts of my organization that are typically not so much under this cost pressure? And I think those thoughts are giving kind of are doing a disservice, because it's not really getting the stuff out of AI that it has the potential to deliver.
Mark, what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, look, integration is the number one headache for most CIOs, and this is just compounding that headache. One of my consulting colleagues has a chart, which is his IP, so I don't have it here, and he's compiled as many new early stage AI-driven companies as you can on one page, and there are thousands and thousands of new players offering all kinds of niche services, products. And CIOs, particularly larger enterprise scale CIOs, are challenged with, how do I bring AI into the business, or help the business bring it in, but in a way that's controlled, secure, safe, compliant, and all of those things. I think what Alex is saying is spot on, which is, let's cool the conversation down and think of AI in terms of, it's another technology. It helps us do things better, faster, cheaper. Okay, how have we handled technologies like this in the past, and then build that strategy into how the enterprise approaches AI. But definitely integration is probably the biggest problem, the biggest headache.
And just on that integration, there's a really nice question just come in actually, which is, and it's good to be 39 minutes in and we get a good regulatory question. I think there's always the nice knotty ones. What regulatory challenges do you foresee as AI becomes more prevalent in investment management? That's a great question. So thanks to the LinkedIn user that asked that one. That's a good one. I'll go to you, Mark, first, and then because I always know you like the regulatory knots.
Yeah. I'm a nerd. I'm the nerd in this space. I didn't introduce. James introduced me. I'm based in the US, and I'm the US senior advisor with Marvin Labs. So I have followed very closely the regulatory discussions that have been going on in the US over the last 2 to 3 years as LLMs emerged. And in particular, I followed what's been going on at Senate level, where there have now been two major committee meetings discussing on a bipartisan basis, an unusually cohesive bipartisan basis, the need for regulation around AI. Nothing has yet emerged, but I predict it will be. In the meantime, in the US, and I'll talk globally in a second, but in the US, over 40 states now have AI bills on their books. And California is pushing to put in an AI safety bill that's very similar in approach and tone to the European Union's AI Act that was enacted earlier this year. The challenge here is, of course, balancing safety for citizens, for society, against the ability and need for business to innovate. I actually think investment management is one of the least impacted areas, because at least institutional investment management, once it becomes once that becomes client facing and private client facing, then it becomes different. But at the institutional level, there's always been an approach that capital markets and commercial banking are kind of big boys games, and so the regulations have been there, but they've been light. And I think with AI, that will remain the case. But where AI-enabled tools, services, and capabilities touch private investors, then I think you will see quite a lot of regulation that is already been put in place, both at the state and federal level in the US, and you're seeing it in other jurisdictions. The EU is the biggest example of that.
I think that's a good answer. I mean, you, Alex, you spend a lot of time in the Middle East. I know recently been involved in the GAIN summit with Oracle in Saudi Arabia. How do you see that regulatory question, particularly in relation to investment analysis?
Yeah. So I think if we are looking, and if our clients are looking at regulatory, AI is one of these very weird technologies where you almost started with a regulatory question when the technology came around. Basically the week after ChatGPT came out in November 22, there were the first questions about how do we regulate this technology. And I think some jurisdictions have had sensible approaches. Some have gone overboard, but it's very much something where you'd wish that that regulation looks at the outcomes of whatever you do with AI. Right? It's about, if you talk about KYC, if you talk about client onboarding, you want a regulatory overload that makes sure you're not mistreating certain groups, that you're not rejecting people with certain backgrounds over proportionally and unfairly. So I think you want some regulation that takes care of these outcomes, but really, and I know there are regulatory approaches doing that. Really, you don't want to be overly concerned with how people then actually get to these decisions, because there's still some commercial discretion that organizations should have on how they get to decisions. I think for us, the very big regulatory impact is around explainability, and that obviously is a very, very hot topic in AI right now. And it's about, how can you validate that what your AI model is putting out is actually not a hallucination or not some made-up fact by the model, but is actually something that comes from the underlying data. Luckily, this has been such a major challenge for the industry for the last 18 months that there is quite a few very, very good approaches to making sure that you're not making up data and you're controlling for that to a massive amount. So while there are still these examples of ChatGPT, I know ChatGPT came over with a new model version yesterday, and they still, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the strawberry example, where people ask ChatGPT how many hours are in strawberry, and ChatGPT, for some inadvertent reason, thinks there are 2 hours only. So like, people can still make fun of these hallucinations in a model, but really any good modern AI application that you see in the wild that uses AI for productive purposes, they have fixed hallucinations for the most part. I mean, there will be very, very few and far between still there, but there are so many techniques, so many approaches to making sure that you very, very rarely see hallucinations still in the wild in a modern application, in a modern, well-designed, well thought out application.
That's a good point about you seeing less of it. It goes to a question earlier that came in about what safeguards, and we've got still just 2 questions to finish up on. So just briefly on this one, what safeguards should be put in place against AI-related cybersecurity risk, which sort of extend on the regulatory piece just into cybersecurity? Is it no different to anything else regarding cybersecurity, or does it extend further because of the implications, as you say there, of actually getting into a system and influencing it so it begins hallucinating in the wrong way?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I think this is while kind of dealing with hallucinations is a very well explored area. A lot of the more innovative cyber attacks on large language models are still very fairly underexplored. I think it's a topic that every vendor needs to take serious, every organization needs to take serious, that needs to spend some time thinking about it. But ultimately, it's something that I think goes the way as cybersecurity risk goes in every reasonably complex system, right? There will always be some attack surfaces because you're running in a very complex system. But we are constantly seeing them, and we're constantly playing a game of whack-a-mole to fix security issues. And I think AI will not be terribly different in that than the internet.
Yeah, I think you're right. Just to move on, because we've got just in the final 10 minutes, 15 minutes, just the next question that we've got that we want to explore, which is what are the most valuable AI use cases? I think that sort of plays a little bit back there to where you're seeing some of the benefits. And I think there's a question linked to that. Whilst we're talking about valuable AI use cases, someone's asked a question about, it links a little bit back to the regulatory one around how can regulators strike an effective balance between advancing innovation, which is a little bit about sort of valuable use cases, and ensuring adequate investor protection, particularly in areas like model transparency, data privacy, and algorithmic accountability. So perhaps, Alex, if you take that one about valuable use cases and linking it to that, I guess in some ways, how do you protect or balance innovation and protection, especially for investors in the investment analysis space?
Yeah. So really, I mean, this is a lot talking in my own book, obviously now, but like we are big believers of AI in generating alpha activities. So in helping investment analysts making better decisions or making sense of data. We're big believers in that. We think this is one of the slightly underexplored areas of the industry of where AI sits, and it's one where AI has a massive impact. There are certainly others, right? I mean, the common examples are always around compliance, KYC, client communication, but I really think that the revenue generating side is underappreciated and is one with vast opportunities. And then kind of thinking through how regulators look at it, I think regulators need to look at it just like they do with human-driven investment management, right? It's outcome based. If you make a mistake modeling in your financial model that leads you to investment decision, and you're doing this in Excel because you fell asleep on the numpad and a few numbers entered your model wrongly, then that is commercial risk your organization has to take. And if you're doing this carelessly and negligently, then your organization needs to have a close look at itself. But in the end, I mean, this is the commercial risk of the investment management organization, and it's something that I hope the regulator will take a very outcome-based approach on, where they're not trying to regulate how people get to decisions, because that is ultimately economic freedom that every organization can pick and choose however they like. But they look at, is there something outrageously wrong? Is there a bias that I don't want as a regulator, right? Is there a disadvantaged group in this that I really don't want to have disadvantaged? But I hope that regulators pick their battles, make sure that they regulate only the most unfair outcomes, and I hope that they only regulate the most outrageous, the most negligent, the most grossly ineffectual outcomes, and leave the rest to the marketplace.
I think that's good.
Really, who should deal with that?
I think it's a good point. I'll come to you, Mark. I mean, myself and others, we've gone through many regulatory changes like RDR in the UK, for example, which brought in big changes in wealth management, etc. And I think that balance of getting the market to manage this, I think, is quite sensible. Mark, just a couple of quick points from you just before we go to the last question and then sum up. Just particularly that piece about the valuable AI use cases and obviously the regulators making sure that the right protections are in place.
I'll deal with the regulatory one first. So I think principles-based regulation is the most effective because it's flexible, it's somewhat future-proof, and I agree with Alex that principles-based, outcome-driven regulation is what we're looking for in the AI space. I think we broadly have that in the EU's AI Act, which, as I say, I anticipate something similar being enacted in the US. They have different risk categories. There are broadly three categories of AI activities. One is prohibited, which is things like live facial recognition, live sentiment analysis. So that would prohibit advertisers, actually looking at your facial reaction on social media and deciding whether to serve you more ads or sell you something. So those sort of activities are prohibited. And then you get into high risk categories, and this is broadly principle driven. It's what Alex was saying, which is that is there going to be bias in the outcome if you're using AI to make decisions around credit, housing allocations, use of healthcare, anything that's really important to socially. Then there are some requirements around it, and one of them is transparency into models, how those decisions are being made. Once you step away from those kind of high risk areas, you're into kind of everything else, and there it's very loose, as it should be, because it allows companies to then innovate in areas that are not posing systemic risk to society or individual risks to people's financial or health well-being. And in those areas, then companies can innovate and build whatever they want. So that's what I say on that. I think on the use case side, there are sort of four areas in investment management that I see strong use cases. The first one is sentiment analysis that we talked about earlier, and that's the ability of LLMs to really grab unstructured data such as social media commentary, ad hoc interviews with C-suite members, data like that. Second one is predictive analytics, the ability to pull in earnings reports very, very quickly, turn out an analysis and make some potential view of where the company is going in support of a decision around investments, and not making the investment decision, but supporting it. I think the third one is risk management. So you find in particularly, annual reports, companies try to bury bad news, they bury ongoing legal cases. The ability of an LLM to identify those, pull them out, and identify them as potential risk areas is something that's enhancing the risk management in investment management. And I think lastly is around personalized investment advice. So we saw the rise of the robo-investors quite a few years ago now, 5-6 years ago, which were essentially machine learning driven apps. Now we're looking at the next generation of LLM driven apps or augmented apps that are helping individual investors that are not in the high net worth area, but in more middle class. Those tools are coming along using LLMs to help make investment decisions and provide robo investing options there. So those are, I think, four key use cases that are emerging.
I think that's a really good answer. Just to move, because we're coming into the final question here, which would be, what advice would you give firms hesitant to adopt AI? And obviously, Alex, one obvious one is start using use Marvin Labs free beta. I mean, if you haven't done it already, visit Marvin Labs website, use the free beta, start looking at what we're talking about today in real life, and it's easy enough to sign up. But joking apart, what would you say? What advice would you give? And the same for you, Mark, just within a minute or two each.
Yeah. I think the real advice is to just start doing something, and in particular, start talking to third parties. You won't solve AI with the same mindset that you solve database migrations. AI is not just an IT project, just another IT project. So really, you need to start talking to outside vendors. This might slightly be me talking my book, but do that. I think there are areas where it's very, very easy to dip your toes into AI if you haven't done so. The thing we really like is that we are being brought in analyst by analyst, desk by desk. There's not a much integration project that needs to run. There's no massive consultant overhang. There's no massive 5-month, 6-month project to start using some AI use cases. And I think that's good because your competitors are. That is the other thing, right? Your competitors are looking at this. If you're hesitant, then the marketplace will start looking at your competitors.
No, I agree with that. I think I'd just add to that on the competitor piece, one tip I would give would be to make sure you don't get sucked into vaporware. There's an awful lot of companies making a lot of promises about what AI can do, but they don't actually have a beta. They don't have a working model that you can try and use. Yeah. And my tip would always be, if you're hesitant, don't get sucked into vapor stuff. Start using platforms, something like Marvin. It's got a beta. You can use it. You can go type companies in. You can see that shortcuts a lot of time rather than being hesitant, looking on the edge. Mark, just final thoughts from you on that topic.
Yeah, I think the first piece of advice will be focus in on a handful, not even a handful of really, really important use cases where you could potentially deploy AI. Because frankly, you put AI on anything everywhere in the organization, you're going to have some benefits. But clearly, some use cases are much more important to the strategic success of the business than others. So be really focused around it and put a lot of things on your roadmap and pipeline, but pick 2-3 things just to start with. Start small, as Alex has said, play, get going, pilot, test. But be aware that if you have success and you want to scale up, it can get expensive. And we've seen this with a number of organizations that I've worked with and across the consulting space. They start small and they play, and suddenly they want to scale up and it gets expensive. So you need a reality check, and you need experts involved from outside the organization, both on the product side, like Alex, and also on the services and consulting and advisory side, like myself, who can help take you down the path towards employing AI effectively in the business and realistically as well. And I think the last thing I'd say is that AI is intensely data-driven. So if you don't have enough of a data-driven culture, you're going to have to start changing that, capturing data, using data, understanding data, and building a data-driven culture to really get the best out of AI.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Mark.
Can I add something? Because Mark made a very, very interesting point, and I think it's very important to bring that home, because that's something we're very passionate about. You need consultants and you need product people, but make sure that your product people are not consultants in a disguise. What I mean by that is, James alluded to this, right? Yeah. Given that AI is so on vogue right now, there are so many companies popping up doing something with AI. It's so easy producing a slick video showcasing a chatbot doing something phenomenal. It's so easy putting out a demo in any kind of way. It's very difficult putting out an AI product that actually works outside of a demo case. So the advice we would give everyone is, make sure that the product you're getting married to, that product is actually real. It works. It works outside of a very, very controlled demo environment, and you're not just talking to consultants in disguise that will sell you vaporware, that will work with you to build a product. You really want an outside party that has a product, that has a differentiated view, and that has something that works, because that's the incredibly difficult part in AI. It's making sure that your little demo scales to thousands of companies, thousands of use cases, thousands of questions.
Yeah, I think that's great, Alex. That's a good place to finish. It just remains me to say thank you to everybody who has joined in today, asked questions. We're up on the hour exactly, and we didn't even use AI to do that. We used actual intelligence, not artificial intelligence. So there you go. But thank you to everybody that's watched. If you have any further questions, email us, text us, LinkedIn us. You can find us at marvinlabs.com. You can try the free beta at marvinlabs.com, and we will speak to you soon. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Alex, and have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you, James. Thank you, everybody, for listening.